It's okay that you're 30 or 40 years old and you've never had this conversation before or been able to express this before. It's okay. We're all the same. We're here with you. Let's grow together. Let's support each other. Let's hold space for each other. Let's retrain our nervous system. Let's tap into the emotional field. Let's cry. Let's cry together. Right? Let's support each other. So that's why I find the work super, super important. And that's why I've really dedicated myself to the work.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Recovery Podcast. Really grateful that you are here for another episode, another week. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And if you're here for the first time, would love for you to take a moment right now to like and subscribe to the show. You can go on YouTube and subscribe to our weekly episodes, or go onto Spotify or iTunes and leave a review. And what this does is it helps people to find the show. And people are finding this show. So thank you so much for all of your support. And thank you for all the messages that I'm receiving from my listeners that are loving the guests, something that touched you by hearing their personal story or someone's authenticity or vulnerability. Thank you so much. So again, we are so happy to have you here. And when I say we, I mean me. And I guess my team. I guess I have a team too that helps me to edit the podcast. So I'm really excited for this next guest. That is someone that I met years ago along this journey of entrepreneurs in recovery. He is another archetypical, is that a word? He's another archetype of entrepreneur in recovery. And his name is Michael Dash. And so Michael Dash is someone who is, well, he was actually a gambling addict. He had trouble with gambling. So I'm excited for this episode to get into gambling addiction. We never got onto that topic into this show, and 42 sessions, 42 episodes. So in this episode, you're going to hear about Michael's gambling addiction. You're going to hear about all of the work he's doing in the world with his retreats that he's running worldwide. He just had one here recently in Costa Rica. So he's just an amazing individual. He's a big advocate for recovery processes and recovery process. He's also a big philanthropist and giving back. He's just an overall inspiration. So we talk about on this episode how we met. So I'll save that, won't spoil it until the show. So again, Michael Dash, amazing guy, author. Tune into the show. I hope you enjoy the episode. Peace. Hey, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jesse. Looking forward to it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's been many years. We connected many years ago for the audience to know how we got together, because every single guest, we have a connection. If we don't, then they found me through some type of something. But a lot of people I'm already connected to. And for you, we met, I think, in 2019. You invited me to the Summit of Greatness with Lewis Howes, and you had a VIP ticket. I thought that was extremely kind of you, considering we had only met a few times and we've never met in person. So the first time we met was at the Lewis Howes event. So I always really appreciated that about you, your kindness and your giving. So it's been many years in the making. You are definitely one of the archetypes of an entrepreneur in recovery. And we were introduced by Anna David many years ago because she heard of my brand, Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And she's like, you got to meet Michael Dash. And we're going to get into your brand and things that you were doing back then. And I actually talked to you right before your book came out. So we're going to talk about the book and all that stuff and get caught up. But just really appreciate you having the time to interview, and really appreciate you seeing you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I just want to acknowledge that generosity is part of how I live. And when you're generous to others, it always, always comes back to you without fail. And generosity is something I try to practice all the time because it impacts generations of people. When you're generous to one person, they're generous to another. It's like a trickle-down effect. That's why the words are within each other. So thank you for bringing that up. And hopefully it's a message to anyone listening to flex the generosity muscle. Flex the generosity.
Yeah, I mean, you left a mark on me big time. I mean, that wasn't a small gift. I mean, that was a very serious gift. And I got to meet Jesse Itzler and Ed Milet and all these people because of you. So that was a gift I'd never forgot. We've stayed connected, even if it was from a distance at times. But that's why we're doing this podcast, because I want to hear your story today, and I want to get to know you better, and I want my audience to get to know your message better too, with all the things you're doing right now. So with that said, I would love to just start with you sharing your story, and you can go as far as deep as you want, but I would really love for you to just kind of catch us up, your past, a little bit of that past, but definitely catch us up to who you are today, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I grew up the son of an entrepreneur, and very quickly, I was working for my father at 8 years old. And very quickly after that, I was introduced to gambling at 10 years old by my uncle. He was my favorite uncle at the time, and not so favorite anymore. But, uh, at 10 years old, I made my first bet, and I won my first bet with him at Thanksgiving dinner in Massachusetts. I was living in Jersey at the time with family all around who was really oblivious to what was happening. Like the potentials of the damage that gambling can cause. When we talk about addiction, I'll just go into this for a sec. But when we talk about addictions, most people are thinking alcohol, they think drugs, they think porn. A lot of people don't think gambling, but I would subscribe that gambling is as dangerous, if not more dangerous than anything, because you can gamble at any time as long as you have a computer, anywhere. Eventually the liquor store closes. Eventually you can't reach the guy supplying you drugs. Eventually they'll say, but gambling, as long as you have power and a computer, you can gamble anytime. So um, in New Jersey, gambling is just a thing in New Jersey growing up there. And so I went from learning and making my first bet with my uncle to working for my father and being in his warehouse and all the guys in the warehouse gambling. And they used to take me to the racetrack in the Meadowlands, which was basically a 45-minute shot right down Route 17 from where my father was working. And I would bet on horses for the $20 that I would earn from working for my. And so that perpetuated over the years. And in high school, I was the first one to have an actual real job outside of my dad, had a bank account. And me and my friends would be playing cards, and I would show up with a checkbook. And my friends didn't even have bank accounts, you know? And like I was that arrogant, egocentric guy who would just bet more than any of them had, right? So they couldn't like win anything. But it was all about winning and chasing the high, which 25 years later, I wrote a book called Chasing the High. And for me, it was super addicting. It was that feeling. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about losing. It was really that feeling of placing the bet. And I chased and chased and chased. So when I went to college, I naturally became a bookie. I mean, what else are you going to do? Um, So I became a bookie. I was still gambling like crazy, and I was introduced to drugs, a lot of different drugs. And I was like a kid in a candy store, and I just tried most things and picked up a habit of marijuana, cocaine, mushrooms, all of it. And then I started dealing cocaine and marijuana in college. And that was my first true foray into entrepreneurship. So I'll pause there for a second. Just take a sip.
Yeah. Well, you know, not for nothing, but a lot of people who are quote unquote addicts, if we're going to use that term, like they are entrepreneurial in nature. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I had an interview show called Fate from Addict to Entrepreneur. And as I was interviewing all these amazing people who were addicts and transitioned into entrepreneurship and so forth, the theme I kept hearing is, when we're as addicts, we are some of the most resourceful people in the world. And we will go above and beyond to feed our addiction, which means we are creative when we need to be, right? Whether that's getting in touch with our drug dealer, whether that's finding the money we didn't have, whether that's whatever it is. And if you can take these traits as an addict and transition them into entrepreneurship, these are some crucial traits that can make you a successful entrepreneur. Being creative, not taking no for an answer, going above and beyond. These are real attributes that I realized over the years can be can make you a great entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And you talked about Fate from Addict to Entrepreneur, the platform that you had. And one of the things we connected on many years ago was you interviewed Joe Polish. And Joe Polish was another sort of archetype for the model of entrepreneur recovery brand that I was having. So that was another touch point. And he was a sex addict, and he's been in recovery from that for quite a while. But I'm really curious about gambling addiction because I haven't had anyone on the show before to talk about gambling addiction. So let's talk about like how bad did it get? And then what was your moment of clarity?
Mm. Thank you for asking. How bad did it get? Let's just put it this way. I went to sleep thinking about gambling and I woke up thinking about gambling. And when I was at work, I was working to make as much money as I could so I could gamble. And I remember many times in my office where I'd have the newspaper folded up with all the sports games. 'Cause I was like everything gambling, right? I gambled on horses, sports, casinos, cards, roulette, all of it. And I would study the sports lines every single day. So I would have a book, like a business book like this. I mean, I was pretending I was reading, and inside of it would be the newspaper folded up, and I'd be really looking at the lines. And then when poker started getting popular online, then I started playing party poker. This was like the first big poker site that you could gamble online. So I was at work pretending like I was working on party poker site, looking at sports lines as to what I was going to bet that night, checking what other poker games were going on in New York City. That's where I was living. So it got extremely bad. When I would go to the casino, um, the I would find the blackjack table that was situated near the sports book and the TVs. So I could have my sports bets going in back of the dealer while I was playing cards, while I was playing multiple hands, by the way, of cards. So I had multiple hands going on and multiple games going on in the bet. And that was the action. It was the action that really just got me excited and just got me like wanting more and more and more and more. And that really, at some point, gambling wasn't doing it for me anymore, just gambling. So cocaine came into the picture because I needed to get higher. I needed something else. And gambling and cocaine were synonymous with me for years.
Yeah. And that makes sense, because you look at what happens in the brain, right? What's happening in the brain when you're chasing the high of gambling or using cocaine or chasing the high of cocaine. You have similar processes that they're talking about and discovering in the brain. So that makes a lot of sense. So you picked up cocaine and then, for those of many people haven't, I don't know if they read your book or not, but I know kind of what happens next. But so like what happens next? And then what was like the intervention? Like what happened where you were able to say, okay, I need to change this?
So it's an interesting story. I was with my brother driving from New Jersey up to Massachusetts for our annual Thanksgiving. And I put the sports radio on because I would listen to sports radio nonstop because I needed all the updates, all the edges I could get to bet on these sports games. And my brother said, "Hey, I can't listen to that. Turn that off. Let's put on music." And I was like, "What are you, crazy?" I was like, "There's two games on today. I need to know who's injured. I need to know what's going on." And he's like, "No, no, I'm not gambling." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I'm not gambling anymore." I'm like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean you're not gambling anymore?" Because we gambled together. We both gambled. He's like, "Well, I'm going to Gamblers Anonymous. And one of the things I committed to is not listening to sports radio." And so I was like, okay. We argued because I was very argumentative. And I finally said, fine, we'll listen to the radio. We listened to the radio, and it was interesting because as we finished the drive, I was like so much calmer and relaxed just listening to music. And, you know, I was a little aggravated at my brother, but I thought to myself, I'm going to find out what these people did to him because I want him back. And so after Thanksgiving, I decided I'm going to go to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting to find out, not because I thought I needed it, even though I clearly did, but to figure out what they did to brainwash me. And that's why I went, not to heal myself. When I went to Gamblers Anonymous, I went in my pinstripe suit. I was working in New York City at the time with my flashy watch. And I sat down and I looked around and I thought to myself, what a bunch of degenerate losers. And as they started introducing themselves, like this one guy was a mailman, this other woman was a school bus, like a crossing. She helped people cross the street. I forgot what you call that. Somebody else was a teacher. Another person was in construction, like a lot of blue collar people. And here I am sitting in my suit with like the CEO of a company and very, very, and everyone started to share. And I slowly started like shifting and realizing like, holy shit, these people I have more in common with than my best friends, than the closest people in my life. And I realized at that moment that I was in the right place and that I needed to be there. And it did take somebody to get up in my face and to call me out on my shit for it to really sink in. And that was the last time I gambled. I went back every week and I was in the program for, I think, 10 years, of which 5, I led the meetings when I moved from New York to Utah.
Yeah, and I think your recovery date is in 2005, which is interesting because that's my recovery date too, is in 2005. So really interesting. And I think that a lot of people may not know that you are also growing like a serious business. Like I think your business grew to like $11 million a year. So can you
For that, half of that.
half of that? Okay. Well,
Five
regardless,
and a half a year. Yeah.
millions
Thank
of
you.
dollars, right? So let's talk about like how you did that too. Like what was some of the what were some of the ways that you as an entrepreneur you were managing your addictions, but you are sort of like a high functioning, let's call it addict. Um, how did you grow that business to that scale? And then what happened to the business?
Sure. Thank you. At the time I started the business, I was not gambling. However, I had I was one of those addicts who was cross addicted, like many of us. Once I stopped gambling, I was still doing cocaine for a while. And then I stopped cocaine because I got punched in the nose, broke my nose, and paid $10,000 for a new nose. And I made a promise to the doctor I would never put anything up this $10,000 nose again. And I haven't. And but then I moved to Utah. My advice, I had really no addictions at the time, except to money. And I was introduced to Adderall in Utah. And then I was introduced to GHB, if you're familiar with. And then I was always smoking weed at some point. And so now I had different addictions in my life. And Adderall was a crippling addiction for me. It's because it served a purpose. The other addictions were escapes, right? They were just pure escapes from my reality. But Adderall was like allowing me to produce at work at a much higher level than I had before. And what I didn't realize at the time is it disconnects you from your soul, from your emotion, from the human element of who you are, because you're so focused on getting things done. And then it impacts the way you treat people. You're very short with people. You're not very expressive. You're not very nurturing. Your mentoring ability becomes at least mine, became overran with my lack of patience with people when I was on Adderall.
Right.
And that led into how I was a leader in my office. So first, when I moved to Utah, I had a business partner who was out there and we partnered together. And I was so focused on making money. I wanted to make more money than my friends made. The high I was chasing was money because every deal was like a bet. It was like winning a gambling bet every sale I made. So I was replacing that high with this, right? And so we were able to build the business at a very high rate of return in a rapid period of time. And then our egos kind of got really consumed with where the business was heading. My goal the whole time was to build it up to 20 million and sell to one of the larger staffing firms, because that's a business I was in the country. And my business partner at the time was happy with what we were making because we were making good money. And she wanted to spend more time with her kids and her husband at the time. And the only challenge of that was I was working more and she was working less. I was working 10 to 12 hours a day. She was working like six hours a day. And we're both making kind of the same. So we became embroiled in this ego battle. None of us was listening to each other. At one point, we stopped talking to each other. And then we negotiated a buyout where I bought her shares at the peak of the company, 5.5 million a year.
Yeah. And I know that your story also involves like a lawsuit that happened that you had to navigate as well. So yeah, you went through a lot as you're on this journey of entrepreneurship, and you're getting into all these, addictions and then replacing one with the other. And then you have this business partner. What happened next?
After I bought my business partner out, we made an agreement, and she started a competing company in India. So we had an India office, and we had New York and Salt Lake City and about 40 employees. And when she started that competing office, she took 9 of my 15 employees in India, and they went with her. It was interesting because all the men went with her, and all the women stayed working with me. It was very, very interesting dynamic. And I said, "You signed a non-compete. You can't do this." And she basically, her argument was, "Well, it's in another country and it doesn't abide in that country." And that was, I guess, I don't know, true, not true, whatever. But I still owed her money from the payout. And after 6 months, I owed her a payment and then a payment after that. And I said, okay, well, I'm not making this next payment. I'm doing an internal investigation as to what happened. And I'll let you know what we come up with. And if this is all true and you didn't do anything illegal, then fine, I'll release the payment. And she sued me when I told her that. So that her lawsuit, her suing me, of course, at the time, I reacted and I countersued her. And her sister and cousin were working for me. And basically a year, 6 months later, they left the company and started a competing company in the US. So then I sued them. So we were in this lawsuit thing back and forth. It was all ego related, and I couldn't get out of my own way. And I imagine the same for her, but I can't speak for her. But I was surrounding myself with people who were like, "You can't let her do this to you," because I paid her the agreement was for $1.35 million, and I paid her $1 million up front. And I didn't have $1 million. I borrowed. I had half of it that I had saved over 15 years of work, and the other half I had to borrow. So there was a large amount of money. And I was surrounded by people, including my father, who at the time was protecting me, but he was really like, "Don't let anyone treat you like this." You don't let her do this to you. And so it was fueling the thoughts that I had. And I couldn't get out of my own head of winning at all costs.
Mm.
And that perpetuated this lawsuit for 6 years.
So what was, I'm just curious because I don't know how many people have gone through a lawsuit, and what were like the greatest lessons you learned from this experience with these lawsuits?
The greatest lesson I learned is that you can make money and you can lose money. And you can lose time, but you can't make time. You can't find time. Once time goes, it's gone. You can't get it back. And I poured 6 years of my life into a lawsuit that consumed my every thought. When I was with any woman I was dating, I was thinking about the lawsuit. When I was in any meeting for a new client, I was thinking about the lawsuit. When I was doing employee reviews and looking at raises, I was thinking about the lawsuit. When I was with my parents, I was thinking and talking about the lawsuit. When I was with friends, they were asking me about the lawsuit. It was all consuming. And I wasn't present in any other areas of my life. And the time that I lost, I can never get back.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. I think that there's a lot to be learned from your story, big time, especially for entrepreneurs. And I'm also curious because your life now is very different. you're you're a very different person. I've got to meet you after all that happened, so I got to meet kind of the new Michael, the more, I would say, spiritually aligned Michael, who has done a lot of work on himself. And what would you say when it comes to money and the chase for money? You know, talk about chasing the high, right? Chasing money. What have you learned with that? And then what are you doing today to sort of also, obviously, money is important. It's a tool. It's also energy. Like, but what are you doing today to fill your cup? So I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So money is an interesting one. Everybody has some sort of relationship with this energy we call money. It's really energy. We need it. It's important. And it's interesting because when I was back in the US, I live in Tulum, Mexico now. So you're right, I have a very different life and different world. But when I was back in the US, everything in the US is about money, at least in the world I lived in. It's all consuming about money, right? When you're in this business where when there's entrepreneur groups, I was in a lot of entrepreneur groups, was all about, hey, how much revenue did the company do? How's it going? How's it growing? What are the goals? Like, are you on the Inc. 5000 list? Did you get this? Did you get that? And it was all about keeping up with the Joneses, right? And even when I go back and I see my parents in Jersey and I'm driving around, I talk to friends and stuff that, oh, we did this to our house is this, I'm buying this house, I'm buying that, blah, 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 blah. It's all about like keeping up or doing what society has planted in our minds of what life is supposed to look like. Like you're supposed to get the job. You're supposed to go to a good college. You're supposed to get the job. You're supposed to climb the ladder. You're supposed to get the promotion, or you're supposed to start your own business. Then you're supposed to get the house and they're supposed to get the wife or husband, supposed to have the kids, supposed to grind your life away so you can pay that $100,000 a year for them to go to college. You're supposed to do all these things, right? Like who says? Society says. And then you're supposed to get divorced by them as half of society. Just so you can like divvy up half of everything you earned to that person. Like, how functional is that? And it's all based on generations passing it down because they haven't been exposed to any other way. And that way might work great for people. And that's great. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But for me, it wasn't for me. Right. I thought it was, but I realized it wasn't because my sovereignty was stripped. Like I felt like a prisoner in my own company.
Uh,
I was running a company that was running me.
uh,
I wasn't running it. It was running me. So as it was running me, my chase for money was all over the place because I had to pay the loan back, pay the lawyers back, keep the company running, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Back to the relationship with money, like I realized like I don't need all this money. Like I don't need to make $500,000 a year to be super comfortable, right? I don't need it. Like how much do we actually need versus the perception of what it looks like on the outside? We don't need a lot. We don't need a lot. And I realized that when I sold my business, settled my lawsuit, that happened. I settled my lawsuit after 6 years. I sold my business. I had 4 houses. I sold them all so I could pay this lawsuit if I had $1 million in legal fees. And I ended up settling with her 6 years later for the same $350,000 I owed her 6 years. Even though the jury ruled in my favor, she threatened to appeal. And I said, listen, I'll do anything to end this. I can't go through a 1 to 2 year appeal. So that's why that's what happened. And that's when I exited my company. And that's when I sold everything. And then I had really nothing. And I started over and I realized like that's when I wrote my book. But I realized like, hey, I have nothing, but I'm so happy. I'm so content. I am in like alignment with myself finally. Finally. And I get to create whatever I want. And that was a super peaceful and scary moment at the same time, because you don't have that security of the chaos that you built in your life, that was your life. And when you have chaos in your life, you're all consuming with it. So you're not really conscious.
yeah. Yeah. And the chaos becomes addicting. And I think a lot of us are addicted to the drama, addicted to the chaos, addicted to the scarcity. And it sounds like when you let that stuff go, you started to become more in alignment. I would say more in alignment with your soul. I would say more in alignment with the true self. And so let's talk about, so you do that. And then, now today, and we can go in any direction, but I know today you're running retreats in like Costa Rica. You're doing all these, you do a lot of fundraising too, but you have these live life activated retreats. One's coming up in Costa Rica. Like, how did that come about? And what are you doing in these retreats?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, year 5 of my lawsuit, I am part of an entrepreneurial organization. I was part of an entrepreneurial organization called YEC. And they had this Facebook group, and somebody posted a link to a retreat in year 5 of my lawsuit. And it said Bali. And I was like, okay, I don't care what it's about. I'm going to Bali. I had an office in India. I visited it every year. After I would visit India, I would go travel somewhere else. And this time it was Bali. And I remember I got interviewed by the person who was hosting it. And I was thinking to myself, you're interviewing me? Do you know who I am? Like, do you know what I've done? So arrogant. But I got on and I schmoozed or whatever. And she's like, okay, we like your energy. Come. So I came there, and at the time I was totally disconnected from me. And I was in that state where the company was running me, where I was all over the place, chasing money, paying Peter, I wasn't robbing anybody, but robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like it was that type of energy, right? Of robbing myself, and just disconnected. And I went to this retreat, and 2 people were on stage talking about flow consciousness and the ability to tap into your intuitive guide at such a deep level that even if your conscious mind is telling you no, it overrides your intuition, overrides your conscious mind, and you go with the flow and make those decisions. And these 2 people were talking about all the synchronicities in their life and the manifestations and all this stuff and I raised my hand and I was like, listen, I'm from Jersey. Okay. We don't believe in manifestations and synchronicities, right? If good shit happens to you, it means you're working hard. And that's how you manifest things. And if you're talking about synchronicities, no, it's called coincidences. Things happen in life, and it doesn't all have this all higher power, higher meaning, universal frequency nonsense. And these people both looked at me and they said, okay, talk to us after the session. We think we can help you. And I was like, I'm not talking to you after the session. This is all bullshit. Anyway, I ended up talking to them and I took their course. And it's an amazing course. It's you can find it online. It's called Flow Consciousness Institute. And during the course, we went through our limiting beliefs and we were doing tapping and EMDR, if you're familiar with these practices. And we were releasing all these limiting beliefs around money, around business, around relationships, around family, around sex, around all these different things. And slowly it started like integrating into my system. And it allowed me to settle this lawsuit like a year later. And this retreat was the precipice of my change. And so I just kept going to retreats. Every year I would go to another retreat, 2 retreats, 3 retreats, different types of retreats. And I ended up going to over 20 retreats and I learned from the best of the best. And that's basically when I decided to start running my own retreats because I knew what entrepreneurs were going through from the different entrepreneur groups that I was involved. And that's when I decided to launch Live Life Activate. And this year is my 6th annual retreat.
Right.
And we focus on entrepreneurs, leaders, creators, and aligning our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual practice with our vision and mission in our life.
Yeah. So what do you do in this retreat? It's like a couple days long. What is it? 3-4 days? Is it?
No, it's 6 days.
Oh, nice.
6 days,
So it's 6
fi-
days.
5
And
nights. Yeah.
speakers come out, and what happens in this retreat?
If I told you, I would have to kill you.
Wow. Well, okay.
Just joking, just joking. So it's a combination. Yes. So I have facilitators come in from around the world that I've experienced their work at some level at different retreats around the world. And it's a combination of activities and workshops that fall into those 4 categories of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So I'll bring in, so this year I have an amazing facilitator of 9D breath. It's this advanced breath work that they developed, and it's all recorded. They've created albums and tracks, and you wear headsets, and they take you on this journey with a theme of releasing fear, for instance. Or that's one of the journeys we're going to be on. Another journey they have is the 5 primary trauma imprints, right? And so they take you through this journey, and you have this amazing release. And then I have another woman coming and she teaches the rapid rewire method. And it allows you to go from a negative state of mind to a positive state of mind with this 30-minute exercise that you can take anywhere with. And then I have some spiritual individuals who are coming and they're going to lead us through a beautiful cacao ceremony or a beautiful blue clay waterfall release exercise.
Mm.
And then I'll lead various workshops. I consider myself an alignment expert, and I've developed a alignment assessment tool that is free and online that we can give to all your guests. And it allows you to zoom out and look at your life on a day-to-day perspective and how you're spending your time and how aligned that is with what you're looking to accomplish in your life. And it gives you an average alignment score. So this is basically the score and the way you are showing up for yourself in your life. Yeah, so it's a super powerful tool. So I'll take everybody through that, and then we'll do some visioning about what they're looking to accomplish in their personal lives, professional lives, and family lives. And then we tie it all together with a bunch of different amazing activities as well in nature and also volunteering activity, which for me, volunteering is the most spiritual thing you can do. And so if I ask you, are you a spiritual person? And you say, yeah, not really. And I ask you if you volunteer and you say yes, then I would disagree with your answer, because when I was volunteering for years and I didn't really put it together that it's a very spiritual exercise in nature because it's God's work. So that's a combination of all the things that we do.
Well, I mean, it's with a lot of integrity, your story, what you went through, and now being an alignment, expert, alignment activator. I think that's like, who wouldn't attend your retreat, knowing your backstory if, they were having this experience of life, which comes with all kinds of things. To me, addiction is the norm. You're born into addiction. Addiction is the norm. We're addicted to the foods, sugar, caffeine, addicted to chaos, programming, all these different things. And to be able to come to Costa Rica to your retreat, experience these amazing speakers and breath work, and the land of Costa Rica is magical. Just being in the land is very healing. The fruits are very healing. And it's a place I'm actually looking to move to because I actually want to be experiencing that magic for some time. Um, hence why my background's like my bedroom, because I'm in the process of selling this condo and potentially moving to Costa Rica. So I love this, man. I love your story. I love how it all just how you just trusted. You didn't try to figure it all out. You had some synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, which Carl Jung would call synchronicities. So I'm curious, like,
I now call them synchronicities. I'm fully in. I believe in them.
yeah, it gets you because once you start seeing synchronicities too with your own eyes, maybe you see a bird or you see a license plate, you see numbers or whatever it is. There's this integration that starts to happen, and you start to really tune into almost like a different experience of life when you start to really look. It's not even like it's like there's a part of you that's looking for that. And I think that part of you is that deeper part, the watcher, the true self, to remind you like your heart is beating you. You're not beating your heart. So you're a miracle. And, when you start to see that, it can be extremely life changing. So I'm curious, one of the things was about this power of non-religious prayer. Would you like to speak to that? I'm kind of curious to hear about your take on that.
Yeah, thank you for asking, because I was about to interrupt you, but I retrained my nervous system not to interrupt people so much. I used to do it all the time because I wanted to share, like when you talk about synchronicities, synchronicities are directly connected to miracles. They're directly connected to miracles. And when you open your eyes and you see synchronicities, these are also miracles if you choose to allow them in. And this non-religious prayer is something over the last 2 years that I've been introduced to and connected to. I was born in a Jewish family and pushed into like learning Hebrew language so I could get a bar mitzvah, which meant absolutely nothing to me. And I had no connection to except the party at the end of the bar mitzvah. I mean, who doesn't like being held up on a chair and everybody celebrating? But besides that, I had no connection to this religion and no connection to religion in general. It turned me off. What I witnessed is war around the world and war stemming from the divisiveness that religion caused. That's my view. I'm not trying to put it up me. And through that experience, I distanced myself through religion and prayer. I consider them the same thing. It wasn't until recently through the men's group that I am a founding member of, and also that I've learned a lot of this from, called Men of Means, that I realized that prayer, I was taught prayer in a different way. I was taught it as a way of intention setting, right? We like to say we impregnate the world with our intentions through non-religious prayer. And it's not praying to a specific figure, Jesus, Buddha, Allah, Moses. It's none of that. It's praying to God, whatever that God is. We're not trying to tell you what it is. You know what it is to you. That energetic force, that universal force and frequency that exists if you allow it to. And it's depositing your intentions and asking God to meet you along the way, to show you the signs that you're on the right path. It's not begging and pleading. You know, most people think about prayer, they think about the person on the side of the bed, please stop the suffering, this, that, and the other. No, that's begging. That's not praying. Like praying is the way I look at it, I've experienced it, is depositing your intentions through to God and asking God for the signs that you're on the right path. And that doing that actually led me to becoming an executive in Metamines, this men's group, because what I was praying for was impact and wealth to meet each other so that I can find one divine path to create both. Because I created a lot of wealth in my life and I created a lot of impact in my life, but I hadn't figured out how to create them on the same, like together. Because wealth is important if you want to make impact.
Well, yeah. So I'm really big into what prayer is, and it's different for each person depending on your religion and how you were brought up. And I was brought up Christian from a very, very early age. And, prayer meant a certain thing. It was almost like wanting. I want God to do this. I want God to do that. And in time, what I discovered, and this was discovered through many different teachers, one being Greg Braden. Greg Braden actually says that prayer is a feeling. Prayer is a feeling. And so what I'm hearing is, prayer is an intention. It's a primary motivation without wanting or needing. It's sort of like a communion. And so I love that. And I'm in alignment with that, with prayer. I used to always ask God for this and that and this other thing. And I just stopped doing that because that's lack. And in God's universe, in my opinion, it's abundance. So that doesn't make any sense for me to ask because that means there's scarcity, like I don't already have it. And if you really study some of the scriptures too, you can see that you're asking for things. If you are doing that, you're asking it like it already happened then, if you're going to ask, because that's more of what I align with today, just based on some of my research and what I've learned from some of these teachers. So I really love that. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious about this men's group. So why is it important for men to find other men to commune with? Why do you think that's important?
Well, if you look at what's happening in the world right now, I think it's 78%. And I'll just speak, I think these stats are US based, but I'll just speak to that. I believe 78% of the suicide rate is men. 99% of mass destruction is caused by men. School shootings, war, that's caused by men. The things that, when you look at like buying power and stuff, it's usually men who have buying because, more men are earning in the world, right? So they have the ability to spend their money wherever they want, right? So when we talk about addictions, some of the biggest addictions we haven't even spoken about that are really focused on men and boys: video games, pornography. These addictions drive isolation. They drive isolation, right? The technologies that we have, that social media even drives isolation. These are all addictions on top of like the traditional addictions that we speak about, right? These are the real addictions that are just not that the others aren't, but these are like addictions that are destroying boys and men, and that are raising certain boys and men to a certain degree. Most men are very confused about women after the Me Too movement, about how they're supposed to treat women, about what is okay, what is healthy, what is not healthy, what do I ask permission for, what don't I? And because of that, they isolate themselves. So connection is so important to overcoming addiction. And emotions, being able to release and express yourself. Most men don't have an area to do this, and they haven't been taught how to do it because our fathers didn't know how to express themselves. And if your father could express himself, you're in a very rare category. And you should be very grateful. My father, and I love my father, but he expressed a few emotions, anger and happiness. And he didn't express for the majority of his life any of the emotions, any of them. Gratefulness, no. Excitement, I mean, maybe, but like joy, no. I never saw joy. Jealousy, no, although I know he was jealous. Shame, no. I know he carried shame, right? Um, Fear, no. He wouldn't, he would act like he wasn't afraid of anything, which I know is a lie, right? So I wasn't introduced to any other feelings, emotions. So I lived my life in these two areas for the majority of my life. There's like excitement and anger. And most men live in with a lot of anger because it's pent up love, the highest frequency of all of them, love. Like my dad didn't, the way my dad showed love is not, it's not really love the way I've learned it now. You know, when you get knocked down as a little boy in football or in baseball, when you're like, I don't know, 5 to 8 years old, 9 years old, then your dad is like, yeah, get up, don't cry, stop crying, just get up, right? That starts at a young age. And you learn that crying is not acceptable. Not acceptable in your house. Why would it be acceptable anywhere else? So all these things that are ingrained in us as little boys, as we're growing up and everything, then we become adults and we have them all in our chromosomes, in our DNA. And we don't know what to do. And that's why men's work is so important, because this is a safe area for us to be. It's okay that you're 30 or 40 years old and you've never had this conversation before or been able to express this before. It's okay. We're all the same. We're here with you. Let's grow together. Let's support each other. Let's hold space for each other. Let's retrain our nervous system. Let's tap into the emotional field. Let's cry. Let's cry together. Mm-hmm. Right? Let's support each other. So that's why I find the work super, super important. And that's why I've really dedicated myself to the work.
Yeah, you said a lot there. I mean, there's no doubt the the silent epidemic, which is massively huge, is internet pornography. I mean, it is just massively huge. I'm gonna get a few people on this podcast. We're gonna just dive deep into the stats. But it's a massive, massive shadow of society. And there's a lot of shame. I literally don't know anyone in my life, any men in my life that I have been in contact with that did not have at one point an issue with pornography in my life, my close friends, not one. They've all had to find a recovery process for that. They all had to do that. And many of us started messing with that in 2014, and we started to play with it and relapse, to quote unquote, if that's the word we're going to use. And, now many of us have found success together, and we have shared those successes and wins. But, having a men's group to be vulnerable, to share about this stuff. I mean, I started watching high-speed internet pornography at 11 years old. I'm 41 years old. I watched that until I was like 40 years old or 39 years old. And, it's, and I've been on and off with that recovery process since 2014. And I have a lot of ways to tackle recovery and addiction. I mean, I know a lot, as I dedicated my life for 18 and a half years to this. So what about the average Joe, right? So I think someone like who's suffering and could benefit greatly immediately from a men's group, I think that's really powerful. So this Men of Means group that you're in, you recently had shared it with me. I don't know a lot about it. I've only dove into the website a little bit, but what is this? What is this like, this community?
Yeah, so we're an online community that also has in-person retreats and coaching programs, and it's an affiliate model. So once you come into the program and you bring in other men, then you get a percentage of their monthly fee. The monthly fee is $99 a month, and we meet every Saturday 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific time online. And Soleil, the founder, gives what we just call a sermon, right? So he'll speak about a variety of different things that come up in our lives. So with the four pillars of the group being radical honesty, meaning we're radically honest with people, right? We're not lying, we're not hiding, we're just radically honest. And we're delivering it in a way that they can receive it. Radical integrity, that we have integrity with ourselves, that when we make a commitment to ourselves, that we keep it. How many times have you, I know I've done it all the time. I said, all right, I'm going to commit to this. And then I don't. And like, because nobody else is looking, nobody's there to hold me accountable. But God knows, and you know. Radical ownership, we call it own your shit. So when you screw up, take ownership of it. It's not that big a deal. We all screw up in life, right? And lastly, play. Because as men, we tend to take ourselves way too serious. So playing and having fun, and this is important for us. So these are the four pillars, and we'll have Saturday sermons. We'll talk about doubt, like how can we be a doubt detective, and wherever there's doubt in our life, eradicate it, because doubt is the devil. How can we replace joy? How can we be a joy generator and generate more joy in our lives? And a variety of other topics.
Yeah. I'm definitely very curious about this group that you've created, and we'll talk more about it. But yeah, we'll share the two in the notes and everything. So any man who's listening to this, they'll have a direct access to it. And yeah, this
And
is
we
just
give, by the way, we give 2 weeks free. So you could come in, check it out, see if it's for you or not. We also have a platform called Circle, where they connect with each other. We have a free video course called The Man Inside. It's amazing. And a variety of other support areas there.
Yeah, I love that. So we'll definitely share all that. I mean, Michael, it's been amazing to have you on the show, to hear your story, to hear the turnaround, the choice points you made to become the person you are today. It's been an honor to call you a friend and stay connected. And I'm looking forward to staying connected even deeper in the future. I'm curious. What is your highest, let's say, your highest intention right now? What is your highest vision? What are you bringing into reality right now?
Well, next week, I'm bringing this retreat into reality. And then after that, there's some things in the works that I can't really speak to, but it's involving the men's group, and it's taking a higher level of leadership in that group and really directing it. And it might include heading back to the States. Every time I've said never, I've done it. So 4 years ago, I said I'm never going back to the States. So looks like I'm heading back to the States, possibly, maybe Austin area. So if there's any connections or that you have there, we want to bring this work not only online, but we want to bring it in person because it's so needed, so necessary.
Yeah, definitely. Some of my first mentors that helped me get into entrepreneurship are in that area. So definitely will connect you. I've had some of them on my show. So definitely will about that. And are there any resources? Are there anything that you want to share? Like, how can people find you, find your retreats, what you're up to in the world?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, first off, I'd love to gift to everybody the alignment assessment. It's free, it's online. So I'll leave that link. Also, my book, Chasing the High, is on Amazon and Audible. So feel free to get it there. It's an entrepreneur's mindset through addiction, lawsuits, and his journey to the edge. And there's a lot of great tips in here. And if you want to find me, I'm on, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Usually I'm on Instagram more than the others. And it's just MDASH1, MDASH and the number 1. And lastly, my website's just www.michaelg-dash.com. And I really enjoyed being on the show, Jesse. And anybody wants to reach out to talk about anything that I've shared here, I'm glad to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And just thank you for everything that you've contributed into my own life. And thank you for putting your work out into the world and recovering out loud and allowing people to find relief. So thank you for everything you do, brother. I'll be talking to you really soon for sure. And hope you have a really great, wonderful retreat next week.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for having me. Stay activated.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Your support means the world to me. So thank you for liking and subscribing to the YouTube channel and to this podcast. We've got amazing content and amazing interviews coming out soon. So thanks again. Enjoy your day. Sending love and blessings to you all.